Am I on now? Oh, I'm on. Yeah, okay. I'm actually used to pitching my voice up, so I'm going to have to back off a little bit with this microphone. That comes from street performing. I used to have a voice that could, wake the people at the back row. I've got to explain before I start that this is not a talk that I go around the country doing or anything like that. It's not been polished or prepared or rehearsed or anything really. This is the first time that I've tried to talk through my whole film bit. So you're a test audience, really, in terms of timing, in terms of how long it lasts and whether the technology works and so on. So do forgive me for that. I decided, there was lots of, this afternoon I was trying to think what picture I would put up to just stand there at the back. And I very specifically put up a cartoon thing because my attitude to life has sort of been based on cartoons. I had a Saturday dad who used to take me to cartoon shows, and I loved the fact that they could be optimistic, reckless, dangerous and everything else, and then they would just bounce back. And it was an attitude I decided to adopt to life, which you'll understand better in a minute. So yes, I do feel more like Wile E. Coyote than anything else. I am approaching 70. I was born in 1946, and my parents had been through 5 years in London in the Blitz. My dad was a fireman. My mum was rehousing immigrants and all sorts of things like that. But they were both artistes. She was a singer and an actress. And my dad was a puppeteer and an author. So this is him with a squirrel puppet. This isn't me, by the way. But that's him with his... Oh, look, wait a minute. Got the right thing, haven't I? That's his squirrel puppet. And although he did puppet shows with characters coming and going, little fairy stories, not Punch and Judy, but fairy stories and myths and things, he always carried the squirrel and a little velvet mouse to entertain the kids after the shows. So there was this thing about doing the show, you're hidden in a box, all this magic stuff goes on and the kids don't know how it's done, but then you come out the front and go, it's me doing all of that. And he would have the squirrel. And the squirrel would sit on his arm and run up and sit on his shoulder and wave its tail. And it meant that when kids came over to talk to him, they would talk to the squirrel and believe it was alive. And I watched this. They never even looked at the man. They didn't go, it's a trick, he's got his hand inside. The squirrel's alive, like that. And it was shy, so if they come up too strongly, it would go and hide in his armpit and so on. And the mouse was even smaller. He was a little velvet mouse. So I grew up with that kind of background of my parents. They were both artists. They were both self-employed. And I took after them in some ways, although I didn't become an actor, like my mum, and I didn't become a puppeteer, deliberately, like my dad. It took a while to decide what I was going to do with myself, but that was the background. So his friends were all puppeteers, sculptors and so on. He would teach me wood carving and all kinds of mysterious things. So when I got to school, it was really boring because it was all books. And my mum's theatrical friends were all wonderful, colourful characters, some of them fairly famous, some certainly that you've seen. But she later became a teacher because bringing up two kids on your own, self-employed in the theatre, is really hard. She became a very distinguished voice teacher. And that's not doing accents or anything like that, it's to do with pitching the breath so that you can do King Lear for 3 hours. Like opera singers and so on, you need a real bass and strength. So in later life, when I went round to her flat, someone like Patrick Stewart would have just left and Anthony Sher would be coming around later, because Patrick Stewart now is Captain Picard in Star Trek, but he was then a Shakespearean actor and he needed that bass. So she was quite well known for helping people like that. And some of her younger students I would see on telly, like Dirty Den in EastEnders, for instance, who had spent 10 years in jail and then wanted to be an actor when he came out at the age of 32. She sort of adopted him and said, look, you're always going to play gangsters and taxi drivers, get real, you're not going to be doing Hamlet. And within a year, he was on 50 grand a year on ITV. So there's a whole range of people that I've met through my parents and so on. And later on, I got into showbiz, but I didn't mean to. So just quickly through the other bits, if I can do this. Magic trick that I decided would work. The main thing that I owe my dad was that he gave me a magic set. Now, a lot of magicians who that you see, if you ever see them interviewed, say they were first given a magic box when they were 7. It's almost a classic. But I really got into it, and I joined the junior section of the London Society of Magicians and took it seriously. Had books and toys and collections. Unfortunately, I'm skipping quite a bit of the story, but unfortunately, when I got to about 15 and my mum put pressure on me to do O-levels and A-levels and try and get to Oxford and Cambridge and all that stuff, I decided I couldn't do both. And I threw away all my magic stuff and I sold the books back to the magic shop. And it's really silly because 5 years later I was doing juggling and magic rather than going to university. So I resent it terribly, that gap in my life, but it was a decision I made at the time. I dropped out of school. As I say, hastening on, I dropped out of school because I really couldn't take it. I couldn't take hymns and prayers in the morning for half an hour when I was brought up as an atheist. I just felt like it was propaganda, but I couldn't get out of it. I guess now, when it's multicultural, you could get out of it. But anyway, amongst other things, I also didn't like the paperwork. I didn't like the fact that I'd spent 6 years learning French, and yet when I went to France, couldn't speak to people. That seemed like a waste of time. You know, nowadays, I'd come to the library, borrow a disc set and learn basic tourist French and go over there and speak it. 6 years of hours a week is insane. Bad teaching by modern standards. So I won't go into why, I dropped out. It's 1964 and I thought I was the only one dropping out. Actually, kids across the country were dropping out. Tutors at colleges and in schools were going, this syllabus is old-fashioned and out of date. It was only after I dropped out I found out I belonged to the 60s generation where everyone dropped out. Didn't know, I was alone when I first did it. And the first thing I went off to do, I wanted to do a physical job. I didn't want to read books, I didn't want to wear a suit, I didn't want to sit in an office. But because of coming from a grammar school and that, I couldn't get a labouring job, I couldn't get to help Irish navvies build the underground, and I couldn't get a job on the job centre went, no, there's this weedy little boy with glasses going, I want to be a labourer. And they go, no. So what I discovered was archaeology. And although it was labouring and pushing wheelbarrows around and digging and all that sort of stuff, it was also assumed that you would have to be fairly intelligent to know what you found, to know what to report back and so on. This is a picture of me down the well in Sandal Castle in Wakefield, which is the very castle that the Grand Old Duke of York, with 10,000 men, marched up and all that. And what it was, the well had collapsed and there were these big stones down it, which we had to take out and see if we could find anything at the bottom, like old pots that they'd thrown down or whatever. But each of these stones had to be lifted out. And I was given mining training. I'm wearing a safety harness. I would have to go down and clear them. The safety harness in case it all gave way and I disappeared down the well, of course. So I'm putting a thing around the stone, then they pull me out, then they pull the stone out, then I go back down again. And that sort of thing I found fascinating. I also dug up Roman places, Saxon places and so on. So I did that for 2 or 3 years and thought maybe this is sort of where I'm going to go, but there was nowhere else to go without getting a degree. I got to site assistant and assistant site supervisor and all that, and then there was, qualifications came in. So I ran away with the fairground. I actually... I'd finished an archaeological site and I was supposed to be going back to London, and I walked into a fairground in Stamford and this guy saw me. I was obviously fairly muscly by then and probably fairly grubby as well. And he said, do you want to help us take this ride down, the octopus ride? And he was going to pay me 2 and 6 or something. This is 1960, whatever it is. 5, 6, something like that. And I said, yeah. So I helped take it down. Very greasy and heavy, nasty job. And they packed up and drove off to Leeds, and I went back to London to try and find something to do. And cutting to the chase, there was nothing specific there to do. And I thought, well, they said they were going up to Leeds. So I hitchhiked up to Leeds and went to the big fairground space, and there was nothing there. Empty space. And I asked the chippy, and they said, oh, the fair arrives in 3 days' time. So I slept in an allotment for 3 days. Waiting for them. And the day they pulled in, I walked over and went, can I have a job? And they said yes. So I worked on this ride for about 6 months, again getting very strong, travelling around the country, ending up quite daring. If you stand here, when people come down, because they're going up and down and round and round, you can swing the cab round and they all scream. And eventually it got so you could hang on to these two back bits, and then as it rode up, it picked you off the ground, and it would swing gently around, and you'd stand on the bar behind them and go, "How you doing?" And they so I was physically getting quite dangerous. It was kind of, but I was also dancing around in the lights, like thinking I was Mick Jagger, and young girls thought it was all very groovy, fairground boys. But yeah, so it wasn't a very wise thing. The following year, when they invited me to go out again, I went, no. I got through 6 months of that without being in a fight, without anything dreadful happening, and I thought it's pushing it to do it 2 years in a row. So I ended up back in London working in 2 clubs, music clubs, folk clubs. One was called Bungees, which was a little coffee bar, because espresso was a new thing and it was really big. And they had a little tiny room at the back where folk musicians used to play. Quite well-known ones, some of them. But that was the beginning of it. And then I went over to work at Les Cousins. I know it looks like Les Cousins, but it's actually Les Cousins. We used to treat it like it's a bloke that owned it. This is the guy, the son of the guy who owned it, actually, Andy Matthew. And that's John Martin, looking a bit sulky for some reason. So the level of people, I mean, I never know who's heard of these people. Some people go, wow, these are famous to us, and other people go, who? But just before I joined working there, Paul Simon had gone through, Bob Dylan had gone through, and so on. And while I was there, Roy Harper, John Martin, Bert Gantz, and all kinds of people. But it was really, really nice, and they did all-nighters on the Friday and the Saturday, so that, because the tube stops at midnight, it's a Cinderella City, London. So the all-nighter was, once you were there, you're locked in, and there won't be any transport until 6 or 7 in the morning. And the all-night sessions is when people started jamming together, and really exciting stuff went on. Not just their little set, but extraordinary things happened. And on the quiet nights, like on a Wednesday, we'd just get improvisational things. The 2 guys who played on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the 2 Indian guys who played on Within You, Without You, came down with tablas and sitar. And I'd never seen tablas and sitar. I mean, I'd heard it on the album, but I didn't know how it was done. And they were just sitting there playing their set to an audience about this big, really. Nothing very special. And then Davy Graham, a very famous guitarist, came in and had a word with them. And then there was a session with these 2 guys and him improvising Indian music. And things like that would happen. So I wasn't making much money. I think I was making £1 a night, because they used to pay me 2 shillings an hour. It was quite a lot of money back then. I mean, we are talking 1967. People were getting paid £10 a week and things. So I wasn't that badly off, but I wasn't making very much. And yes, so I was part of the 60s. I was 21, posing in a photo box, like those machines where you put in 50p and then pose. The rest is just cheating. But yeah, same old bad haircut, moustache and all that. But I was 21 years old. I was living in Notting Hill in 1967. You can't get closer to the heart of UK 60s. And most people, after a year or two, when the dream broke down a little bit, a lot of people from that subculture were going off to India, because they were going, if you take your money and you go to India, you can live right through the winter on very little money. And I thought, do I want to be the rich white guy living in India while everyone else is, So being a difficult kind of a person, I went the other way. Me and my French girlfriend went to California. We thought being poor in a very rich country might be a much better plan. It was the poorest, California at the time was the richest state in the richest country in the world. I know they're now in debt, but in 1968 and 9, America was actually the richest country. And for instance, although we were tourists, we got food stamps, welfare. We said, look, I'm English, she's French. Here's $70 a month free food stamps. Just nobody should starve. To avoid people having trouble, it was just, we'd be hitchhiking around. I wouldn't hitch now. Can you imagine hitchhiking in America? How dangerous that is. But in 70, when we first got there, the youth culture was so strong, because in America it was much more divided than over here. Because of Vietnam and so on like that, all young people of a certain type were helping each other. And they would lift, take me somewhere, they'd put me up, they'd say, your trousers are wearing out, they'd give me a new pair of jeans, the rich country, poor person thing. So living on the crumbs off the rich man's table worked very well for me. And I was in the States for 18 months, and then in Mexico for, Mexico for 6 months, hitchhiking around. The only reason I'm putting all this stuff in is because this is where I realised I could be a performer. Because when I was in the folk club, everyone was so good at playing music. I just made the sandwiches and sold the coffee. I didn't have any talent. By now, I'm carrying around juggling equipment, top hat, a couple of flutes. I made a sock puppet. Because what happened was, I was juggling as a hobby, right? And I'm in little Mexican villages, I'm juggling for a hobby, and there's a few people standing around going, yeah, very weird, very interesting. And one day, this guy came over to me and he said, so where's the hat? And I said, what hat? And he went, to collect the money. And I said, no, it's a hobby. I'm an aficionado. This is not. He went, no, they're all watching you, look. And he took the straw hat and he went round like this. Come on, he's entertaining you, come on. And he came back with a hat full of coins. And I went, oh, wow. Okay. And he said, can I take the price of a drink out of it? I went, yeah, I guess. Agents get 10%, don't they? And then it dawned on me that actually I hadn't been using this thing. We were still making jewellery and stuff like that, and nobody really wanted junk jewellery in Mexico. It worked in California with the hippies, but in Mexico they wanted something else. And I started cultivating the idea of doing a show. I learnt to walk on my hands, could do cartwheels, did a little bit of magic from my childhood. See, it all came back to me. I went, I know this stuff. I've got tricks I can do. And juggling, which was my, obsession, I should call it probably. And yeah, after 6 months, I thought I could make a living doing this. Then I went back to England, and in London in November, in winter, where there was no such thing as street performing. I mean, there were a few buskers left over from the war, and a couple of musicians, one-man bands and things, but basically the idea of street performing was not a thing, and especially not in November. So I started cultivating the routine. I tried out, you can see the classic outfit, red and white stripes, white glove, sort of mime outfit, strange hairdo, moustache. Didn't know what I was doing. I definitely thought I was going to do clowning, but like Lauren Hardy and Buster Keaton, not like circus clowns with makeup. And I was getting quite good at juggling. Here I am juggling 5 balls, balancing on a chair. I didn't balance very long like that, by the way. It used to wobble over and I'd hold it and then it'd go back down. And if it went the wrong way, people would scream, but actually you can land just as comfortably going the wrong way. But yeah, I was technically quite clever and beginning to find places to work because no one else was juggling. So that in London, if someone wanted a juggler, they would find me. They would ring around and I would end up as the juggler. So I ended up on play school and all sorts of little things like that. But I was also teaching. And every juggler I know teaches 10 more people because people go, that's great, can you show me how you do that? I thought I was the only one for a while. I did court jester at medieval banquets and all sorts of things. But that was all through the 70s. And if I just... I found that glimpse of me on Portobello Road juggling. There is no film of my act. No one filmed things back then. This is before internet and things. That little tiny clip there is me on Portobello Road, juggling, and the Pearly Kings and Queens and the buskers doing music and so on. But there wasn't a lot of... Well, there's just no record of my act, basically. I haven't got no record of it. I'm going to play a different one. It's a glimpse that I found in a documentary and went, that's me! Wow. Then I joined a little group because solo work was quite tricky and they already had established something. And they were doing kind of children's shows and it was all knockabout comedy and kind of slapstick and things. I've got a little clip, I think. It's okay. Oh. Okay. That's why he's singing Norwegian Wood in Swedish, I think. So this is me as I was then. This is the woman who was one of the main people in this little show, and I was teaching everyone I met to juggle, and that's how I got in the show because they went, "Oh, you can juggle. You can make all of us juggle." So that's us touring Sweden, and suddenly I've taken off. Now I'm touring the folk parks of Sweden, and I'm going on stage and getting better at performing, standing still, not just a hobby, but actually becoming a performer. And we were fairly radical. There was still the leftovers of the 60s going on, so that I think the next clip is in Covent Garden, when Covent Garden was still a fruit and veg market, and I used to go and busk there. Nowadays, it's a tourist attraction, and you spend £3.50 on a cup of coffee and go and watch the busker, because there's only one space and you're allowed to do it. Back then, you could do it anywhere. Certain times of the year, they would have a hat fair where you could put the hat on the ground and do your act. And there was there were no qualifications. There were really bad people and really good people. But the whole of Covent Garden for 2 or 3 days was just free to perform. Poets went out, musicians went out, everybody. And I think it's this clip. So now I'm in a gorilla costume. And that's me as the villain. So it was a real knockabout show. The gorilla, Gloria the Gorilla, was a feature player in this show. And she's a female so that she's not King Kong and threatening. She's wearing a ballet dress to say she's not King Kong and threatening. We did her as a cuddly, innocent creature. And I played Gloria for about 2 years, all over the place, mostly in shows, but she was just this character of her own. And the trick we had was that 2 of us used to play Gloria. That was so that at the end of the show, when we all took a bow, they'd go, and where's Gloria? And we'd go, oh, she's had to go. Because if it was just me and then I reappeared, they'd know that I was the one who was inside Gloria. But what happened the way we did it was that sometimes I'm on stage with Gloria when George was inside it, and sometimes George is on stage with Gloria when I'm inside it. It was a very sweaty costume to swap over. We fought who gets to be the first one in, because the second one in was quite uncomfortable. But it was a delightful thing to do. And the reason it's relevant to the film work, which I will get to, is that this was me working inside a big costume where I'm not visible and where I have to play everything really large. Because what happens to start with is that you're doing things like this and it doesn't look like anything, so you have to do it like this. And this is where things like Jabba were exactly the same. It was a very inhibiting creature. You couldn't do small gestures. Everything had to be inside. We were absolutely being maniacs. And some of that came from my guerrilla training. So we would hide behind a wall, we would hide up a tree, we would hide somewhere so that the people on stage would go, where's Gloria? They hadn't even told who Gloria is. And they'd go, get everyone to shout, Gloria, Gloria. So we were in York, and up the side of the cathedral, or York Minster I think it is, there was all this scaffolding. And I climbed up it as the place where I was going to hide. And a policeman came along and said, hey, no, come down. Well, I'm in character. You can't put the head off and go, I'm part of the show, don't worry about it. You have to be a gorilla. You stay in character. So I'm hanging off this thing. And he eventually went off to the show and started complaining. The woman that you've just seen juggling with me there came back with a banana and said, come on, Gloria, come on. And one of the other clowns climbed up to coax me down. What I was trying to look at was to see, I should have put it on autoplay, this bit of footage turned up of me on the scaffolding, which I didn't know about. And that's George coming down. I don't know how funny it was, but we liked it. And that's where I really got into show business, because we ended up on Swedish television. I started feeling, oh, this is what I do. And I'm jumping a little bit, but I hadn't really planned to be in films or anything. People often say, how do you get into movies? I don't know. I fell into it. What happened for me was that my dad died. His wife offered me his puppet show and I didn't want it. I said, I don't want to be junior. Then I found it very difficult to do my solo show because I was a bit upset and distressed, and it was a bit hard to go out and be a solo clown. So I went to study mime. I found this fantastic mime teacher. The Arts Council funded me to do it because they thought, oh, most people would go to France and study with French teachers. I went, no, I've got this wonderful English teacher, but I haven't got the money. I need 3 months off to do it. And I went to study with him, and he had worked in movies. He had done movement. He'd done the apes for Greystoke and things like that. So I'd been studying with him, and then he phoned me one day and he said, go for this advert in the trade papers. And I said, what? He said, look, it just says actors, clowns, mimes, dancers, physically fit people to do big creatures in the Dark Crystal. And I went, but I had an equity card by then, but he went, look, he was going for the job as mime coach, as movement coach, and he wanted his students to be all the characters. So that made me brave enough to go to an audition, because I thought, well, Jim Henson doesn't look too scary. He's a puppet master, and worst comes to the worst, I get to do a workshop with Frank Oz and Jim Henson, so I'm going to go. And I passed. I mean, the quick thing, well, they had hundreds of people, then they had 50 people, then they had 20 people, then they had 10 people, and I was still there. And they said, we're going to do the 10. We want 4 for now for pre-production and 6 more in the filming. And I got into the 4. So somehow, I don't know, I ended up a puppeteer a year after my dad died. And I thought, thanks, Dad. I wasn't planning to be a puppeteer, but I'm now known as a film puppeteer. Oh. And the reason they'd hired us, I will go back one actually. The reason they'd hired us was they had all these creatures that the Muppet people couldn't do. Bent double like this, that's working like, here we go again. That's working like this. Stilt walkers. All kinds of creatures. These are classic puppets. These are classic one-person puppets. Things like that, where the blinking eyes and breathing and all that is generally a 2 or 3 person puppet. So as well as the big creatures, like the mystics that I was hired to do, each one of us, of the 10, got assigned to a Muppet person. And I got assigned to Jim Henson. I don't know if it's because I was so clever or whether he got the last pick, like the kid who no one wants in his football team. But somehow or other I got on Jim's team, me and one other guy. And I think some of it has to do with temperament. Some of it has to do with when you're going to perform a creature as a team, you have to be tuned into each other and go at roughly the same speed and have the same dynamics. So a really lively American loud performer wanted loud people. And because Jim was quite a shy and quiet person, I know I don't look quiet and shy now, but actually, I'm quite... the performer in me is one thing, but left to myself, I'm an introvert. So, and because Jim was also directing the film, not just performing, I really couldn't jabber at it. I couldn't sit there and go, gossip, gossip, gossip. I had to just stand there very quietly while all the other teams are practicing and Jim's changing the lighting and doing that. And then he'd just come over and go, okay, here we go then. So I haven't practiced. Basically what's happening in most of those creatures is that he's doing the head up here and working the hand here. And I'm standing in his armpit doing the right hand. Sometimes someone else would be doing that and I'd be controlling the eyes, doing the left and right and all that. But generally speaking, I was in Jim's armpit all through. Ritual Master, the lead character Jen. I mean, I don't know if everyone's seen all these films, so I'm on Jim's team on both of those characters. I'm doing the goodies and the baddies. This is where I will go on. These are the goodies.
At last, the crystal calls. It is time to return to the castle.
In this particular one, that's me there. And they're really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable to do. Forget the bending down, which I just did, and I shouldn't do it much more anymore because it pulls muscles every time I do it. Back then I could do it and crouch down with flat feet and so on. You're walking with feet that are an extra 12 inches in front of your toes, so when you're not only trying to walk in a crouched position, you've got to lift your foot very high up, which in that position is very difficult. You're dragging in a 6-foot tail behind you, your arms over your head like this, moving the head about, and so on. So that was uncomfortable. Those are the goodies, and I was quite good at those because I do bend down, and I can patiently sit there for an hour, squatted down, while they change the lighting and so on. The other one that we did, however, was the bad guys. This is the hero, by the way, so in this particular shot I'm not doing his left hand or anything, because I'm doing one of the bad guys. You will see them in a second. That's the only cheat in the film, by the way. There are no humans in Dark Crystal. If you haven't seen it, the idea is it's just a puppet film. Actually, Jen climbing up there is a human being. It's the only cheat in the film. He's a midget. For those of you who don't know the distinction, and this always comes out politically incorrect, the language, but most of the little guys I know are dwarves. That's what they call themselves, you know, Warwick Davis and people. Everyone's tried little people, and that sounds like leprechauns. They're basically dwarves in their world, and he's a midget, and they're very rare. A midget is someone who stopped growing when he was about 10 or 11, is still perfectly proportioned, if that's not too politically incorrect. His voice doesn't break. He's like a child, but he's 35 years old. So I sit in a bar with him, having a whiskey and a cigarette, you know, and they'd go, "We're not serving him." And he'd go, he's a film star, he's 35 years old. "Yes, I am." Oh, yeah. Kieran Shah, that is. He's the body double for Jen when he needed legs. So once or twice in the film you'll see him. But otherwise the film is supposed to not have any humans in it, because you shouldn't be able to tell the scale of the characters. That was the idea, to have an alien planet. And to get rid of humanoids. Most humanoids in Star Trek and Doctor Who and so on, they look like a human, they've got a funny head on. You know, I mean, that's it. What we were trying to do was do creatures where you had no idea how it was being done. Which takes us on to, this is a novel, just to give you an idea of the amount of detail. Not only am I doing the two big characters and all of Jim's characters, whenever we weren't doing that, we would be doing little background things. Pod people, when they walk through the jungles. This is a perfect example to me of the kind of thing we did. I suppose I should tell you beforehand that what they wanted was little propeller flowers like dandelions to fly away. And when we came in one day, they were up in the ceiling with a string trying to pull it up, and it would just come out the ground and swing up like that and look completely wrong and wasn't spinning. So what they decided to do, and the reason it says second unit is because that's not the main team filming the thing. It's a second camera and director and so on that does lots of little pickups and details for the show. We decided we were going to have to reverse the film and drop them, spinning like darts. So 6 puppeteers spent a whole afternoon with a basket on a rope. We'd pull these things up. We would all lean over the top. The camera would start and we'd go, and action. And with one in each hand, we would drop them and spin them and try and stick them in the ground. And it went on all afternoon, because if one of them bounced out, what you see on the film is donk, which is all wrong. So we went on and on and on until every single one stuck in the ground. It's a split second of the film. So I left this. That's somebody walks past and that happens, and that was a whole afternoon for a second unit. Stupid, isn't it? But that's how much work goes into. That's why it takes 6 months to make a film that goes for an hour and a half. And because we cheered the time we got them all to stick in. It was just ridiculous. Yes! Oh dear. But yes, you do take after take after take. So moving to my main claim to fame, I suppose, was in the same studio, in Elstree Studios. The next film in after Dark Crystal was Return of the Jedi. Lots of the crew on our film were trying to get jobs on this, sticking letters through letterboxes and going, please, please, please. But mostly it's who you know. And I got called into the office by a classic man with a cigar, you know, the man with the cigar, saying, we've been watching you on Dark Crystal, would you like to work on this big creature? And I thought it was, you know, wow, because I'm so talented. They've talent spotted me. I haven't auditioned for this. I haven't asked for it. I'm called in. Actually, it turned out later that the chief puppeteer, Dave Berkeley, had asked for me. But the film business is being so devious, they wouldn't say, Dave wants you as his co-pilot, because he hadn't got an equity card, and I won't bore you with the details, but basically he was a builder and I'm a performer, and in films you have to be a specialist. You're not allowed to just do any old thing. So eventually they said to me, Dave Berkeley asked, but he hasn't got an equity card, and I went, so get him an equity card, because they thought I'm going to be unionish. No, I demand that another equity person join me. Anyway, so it wasn't because I was talented, it's because I knew this guy.
Whole figure.
That's him.
Yeah, well, I'm the silent brain hemisphere. I do the left hand and the tongue. And that goes in here. And my right hand is free inside the head. And basically works this head control to be left and right, front and back, up and down. I have one other control that can swivel the head, revolve it. And for certain shots I have things like the tongue here, where the hand goes. I have a couple of cable controls that do snarls around the mouth. And using my feet and the weight of my body, I share with David the job of actually moving the body about.
So, from an all-purpose person playing little bits and pieces all the way through Dark Crystal, I found myself in a character that was actually going to have a main scene in Star Wars. We knew Star Wars was big, because the 2 episodes had been out, but I hadn't seen them. They gave me the job. I had to go off to a cinema and find a double bill to find out what I was going to be in. I was 35. I hadn't got kids to take to the movie. I didn't, I'd heard of it. It's embarrassing, really. And there were no DVDs or videos, so you couldn't just go out and buy it. I had to find a cinema. So I watched it the first time on the big screen with the big sound, and I came out after 4 hours or so going, I'm going to be in this! I still thought I was going to be a background character. I didn't really know that Jabba's palace was going to be a feature, 15 minutes, bringing all the original characters back together again. They all arrive at the palace. That's almost what Lucas was trying to do with the plot. How do I get them all back? Because they're scattered all over the planet. With the main character. So the way Jabba works is basically I'm doing the left hand and what I just said there, all the head and body and the tongue and stuff. Dave's doing the right hand and the mouth and doing the talking through one of these kind of microphones and speakers. The talking was dubbed into the film. That big loud voice is not Dave, sadly, because he was upset really when we went to see the film at the cruise show and it wasn't him. My stuff stays because I'm doing the left hand, although I'm not doing talking. Jabba's basically left-handed. The right hand's over the body. I get to hit C-3PO and smoke the pipe and eat the frog and grab Bib Fortuna and all kinds of stuff. Pull the chain for the slave girl. And so I thought I'd do a couple of clips just so you can see how complicated this was. I'll play one first. Okay, so it's a real frog in the hooker. Obviously it's a rubber frog that I'm putting in the mouth. What I'm doing at that point is I'm turning the head to look down, reaching down, someone hands me a frog because I can't find it, I can't really see what I'm doing. And then I'm bringing the head up. As I bring the frog up, Dave is opening the mouth, I put the frog in, he shuts the mouth and starts chomping. I let go of the head, put my hand in the tongue and lick the lips. So that's what I'm doing in there. And the first time we did it, was okay, but they wanted to do another take for whatever reason. So by this time the frog is now very slimy because the mouth's full of all this horrible stuff they used to mix up with Swarfega and KY jelly, I don't know what gunk, just horrible stuff, and they painted it in. So now the frog is slippery and I'm like hanging on to it like that way too, because I haven't got a thumb or anything. And I put it in rather hastily because I was thinking about the tongue move, and they went, cut. I mean, what was wrong? Apparently I left the leg sticking out of the frog, and when Dave was chewing, the leg was going, which they thought was too disgusting. And I went, how can Jabba be too disgusting? Surely that's brilliant. So they said, no, we don't want the leg sticking out, it's got to go right in the mouth. And I won't play it again, but when you next watch it, you'll realise that when I put the frog in, I then go with the hand just to get that leg down before. But that was fun. And then there's another one that I've got here, which was where I had to hit C-3PO, which is Anthony Daniels in that orange gold suit. A stuntman couldn't fit in that costume, so I had to hit the real star actor. I can't see what I'm doing. He can't see what he's doing. Which we talked to the... I mean, basically, nowadays you'd have a pinhole camera and a little thing here and I'd be watching, in modern technology. But in 1982, we've got hanging off our chests these big... it's a big box like this with about a 4-inch square black and white grainy image of Jabba. That's all I can see. I can't see the guy standing next to me. I can't see depth or anything. So basically I'm working blind. I've got to be able to... I've done some stage fighting, but I've basically just got to do something vicious and then stop. And he's going to stand there and react. And if we shoot it from a low angle, you won't notice that I've missed by 4 inches and all that sort of stuff. So we rehearse this gently, with a body double standing in for him while I make sure I don't actually smash into him. And then they go ready and action. And this happens.
The illustrious Jabba bids you welcome and will gladly pay you the reward of 25,000.
Your dog.
50,000, no less.
It's a sound effect that does it. It's that thump and the rattling as he falls over. That was a bit scary, that I could injure somebody. We only did about 2 or 3 takes of that, I think. And we took his legs off as well, so he didn't fall over and hurt himself. So it's a low-angle shot. And it's all film cheating, that's the thing. Now, I don't want to drag on because I'm not used to the timing on this. I can see it's gone 15:15. I'm going to sort of whip through some of these things. I basically worked on Company of Wolves. It says brown envelope job. Somebody rang me up and said, do you want a quick couple of weeks on a film? We'll pay you cash. And I said, yes. It's late enough now that the taxman probably won't come back to me for that. I basically pushed this puppet wolf through this rubber face in the transformation scene and 1 or 2 other transformations. Low budget, 1,100 quid in my pocket. So let's move rapidly on. Frank Oz directed this film and wanted really good puppets. So he hired a lot of us. And I'm, in this one, I think, I'm not in the habit of using this, am I? I think I'm the left leaf, but I might have been the right one. I'm doing the leaf. Basically, the leaves are doing gestures, and they're talking and stuff. And then as Audrey got bigger, I just became a tentacle. And each tentacle was one performer. It was insane, really. In a hole in the ground with 20 other people waving tentacles around. So moving rapidly on, I worked on Labyrinth. I did various bits and pieces on Labyrinth, goblins and things, but my main claim to fame is this is me, this is Kevin Clash, and Dave Berkeley, the other half of Jabba, is behind me. I'm basically doing the body and legs. Kevin's doing the head and the singing, and Dave's doing the hands and arms. And it's a 3-man puppet, which we rehearsed like that for 3 weeks, and then eventually we went on the set. They filmed the set, then they covered it in black velvet, and they covered us in black velvet, like with the beekeepers' gauze and stuff, and then they put the 2 bits of film together. I then did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where there were no puppets, so that was a bit odd, but we were called the puppet team. Our main job was to improvise magician solutions to real people interacting with cartoons. I haven't done a big clip on this because it's a bit difficult to explain. It was nearly all done with black thread and stuff like that. If a weasel was carrying a real cartoon weasel carrying a real machine gun, we're probably up in the ceiling with 2 strings making the machine gun walk like a marionette, and then they painted it in afterwards. I think I did put 1 clip on here just really to prove how much detail goes in. Blink and you miss it. I remember I called it Blink and you miss it. We were shooting at night. We were shooting back to back, so they were shooting in the daytime and a separate crew was shooting at night. So it's about 3 a.m, and they say to our team, this weasel's going to fall off the ladder goes down, it hits a rope, which unties the knot, which a 50-ton weight drops down, and then that throws some... and there was a whole, one of those cartoon things where things all happen in sequence, but it's going to be done in real life rather than cartoon. And the cartoons will be added later. So they said to me, when the ladder hits the rope, we want the knot to come undone, and you're the team of improvising clever guys. Can you make a knot that comes undone? And I went, whoa, yeah, I think. And I went over and I went, well, there's this one where that's the strong bit, and if you pull that, it comes off. But we'll have to do it the other way round, because when the rope gets pulled, you want it to come undone. So then I had to work out something I'd never done before, which is tie that the other way round. And they're all watching me. This is a big bit of rope, by the way. So now this is the bit that's got to be, that's the bit that's going to pull it undone. And that's got to sort of be tight enough here that only when something hits that, it comes off. So there I am, and everyone's on, it's £500 a minute while they're standing around thinking and watching me. I went to the fireman and go, have you got a better idea? And he went, no, that's what I'd use. So, but it's your job. So we did it. And the first time, the ladder just fell through. And then, no, it's too quick. It's got to look as though it forced the rope undone. So I tied it a bit tighter. And the second time, when I say the second time, this is half an hour later. They've done the lighting and the thing and they're ready. Here we go again, guys, fellas. Action. And the ladder goes down. It goes boing. And I go, oh no. And it goes whoop. And great. I love the boing. And then it undoes and then. So they all go off in a huddle. Is that good? Is that good? They're talking to the cartoonist. Is that a good gag? 2 beats? Meh. And I'm going, this is great. You couldn't do that on purpose. I think I'm the hero, And then they said, no, we don't want the 2 beats. It's not that important. You're not that important. You think you're so clever. Do it again. So now you will see, in a split second. Okay. I didn't autoplay this one because it is really so quick that you win. Here's the ladder. That was my knot that came undone there. Pretty good, huh? And I didn't even know they were going to do it in close-up. I thought they had this wonderful wide shot with the ladder going down, and but that split second there is at least half hour's work, maybe an hour's work, 3 takes. But I did that. And imagine that kind of detail all the way through every film you ever watch. That's how much there is there. Oh, hello, what's this? Oh, the toilet.
Eddie, you go to the cops. I'm gonna
Oh dear.
Be careful with that gun.
I didn't mean to put this one in.
Cartoon,
This is no way to make a living.
Wouldn't you know? Lock.
Sorry, I was going to leave this one out so I could rapidly wind up. Second unit, which is not the main screen, it's a smaller unit doing pickups. They decided, this is actually how it ended up. One of us would have been rattling the window and the automatic water came out. Me and a guy called Jeff Felix were asked to go on second unit and improve it. And they had this brilliant idea where Roger was going to fall in, carrying his gun, climb up with his gun going, reach up to the chain, pull the chain down, and flush himself away. That was the gag. That was what they planned to do. So Jeff and I are under the stage with this toilet with the explosion of water, and every time that water explodes, we just get a faceful. He's got the gun on a stick, I've got the chain on a string, I'm going to pull down, spin round, and let go, and all that. And we were there for a whole afternoon, getting drenched. They tried to give us paper suits. Well, you got your arm up like this, so the water just goes down. So after a few hours, we were absolutely drenched. We got a round of applause from the crew when we came out at the end of the day. And it's not in the film. So they just did the simple one. What we did was like, can we add another? Anyway, I knew I shouldn't put that one in. There you go. In that time was when I first moved to Cardiff, and I was still teaching juggling classes. That's at the Rubicon Dance Centre. That was the hooligan that I was at the time. And some of my students formed a thing called No Fit State Circus, which are now quite famous, but they weren't at the time. And I ran away with them and toured with them for about 5 years, having never been on the road with the circus and caravans and all that stuff. But I am going to slip through that because eventually I wanted to live in Cardiff and the circus wasn't going out that winter, and that's the following year. And I got a little job in Central Library on the front desk, and I worked for a couple of years before being offered the job in the computer department with those, look at those old beige computers. And me dressed as a librarian, I figured I couldn't look like I do now. Clean shaven, white shirt, waistcoat, tie, slightly eccentric librarian is what I was going for. But then when the internet came out, I became the kind of computer whisperer, helping the public, helping the staff, and talking to the IT department. We had a cyber cafe for the public eventually, and there's your helpful librarian showing people how to use the internet. Because in 1999, 2000, nobody knew how to. I know we all take it for granted. Well, almost everyone takes it for granted now. But back then, I was paid to sit in the office and play on the internet. Everyone else was going to get fired from their office. I was paid to sit there and figure out how blogs work and Twitters work and Facebook. So that was great. And one of the things it did was put me online because I made a website and was immediately discovered by people who said, you were in Star Wars. I went, yeah, it was 20 years ago. Hadn't thought about it. And they went, oh, all sorts of people want to meet you. Okay, I'll go to a convention. We would go to a convention, and here's Warwick Davis is the MC. Me and Dave Berkeley. We're trying to explain to an audience how Jabba works. And this is Mike Edmonds, who's one of the Time Bandits. And he was in the back of us in Jabba doing the tale. So the three of us are explaining how it works, and Warwick's going, so that must have been a bit strange. Could you see what you were doing? And all that sort of stuff. But so I find myself on stage doing these things and talking about, and occasionally I get flown around. I do little conventions in the UK. Occasionally I get flown around. I've just come back from about 3 months ago. I was in America. I make a little bit of money selling signed photos and so on, but basically it's fun and adventure. About once a year I get to go to a foreign country, Sweden or France or something. And for the last year, I've been working as an archivist. So. All my performer friends find it very odd that I've got this that I'm a librarian archivist as well, because I like books and I like all that. The job has been to collect up 30 years of history, all the videos, all the posters and programs, all the photos and everything, and put them together. We've still got an exhibition on, just at the back of Roast Library, till next Wednesday, I think. I'm giving all the paperwork to the Glamorgan Archives, so future researchers can look at this stuff. 100 years from now, they can look up what we were up to. And I've just launched a website that's got all the stuff on it, which is, you won't find it in Google yet, it's too new. It only got launched last Friday, so you actually have to type in nofitstatearchive.com, and you can see what I've been up to. And this is the final bit, past. Not much of a question time, but anyway. At the beginning of this year, I was talking to a guy that making of documentaries. He takes the film and he gets all the backstage footage and he embeds it in the film so you can watch the film and how it's being done. A bit like having a director's commentary on it. He's made full versions of the original trilogy of Star Wars. He's done Jaws, he's done Indiana Jones. But talking to me, he said, I want to do a little quick one, a 5-minute, 10-minute one with you. And we had a Skype conversation. And then it grew because I said, I can talk to the other puppeteers. What we need is a really good picture of how we were doing it. And we didn't have one, so he got his mate from Electrographica to do this for us. Basically, that's me doing the left hand and the head, and Dave doing the right hand and the thing. Mike Edmonds waving the tail around. Sometimes you'd have someone underneath with various other controls, and the eyes by remote control. This is online, so if you want to watch a 20-minute video of all of what I've just said about Star Wars, Slimy Piece of Worm-Ridden Filth is what Han Solo calls Jabba, that's why it's called that. But if you can't be bothered to learn that address, Google Slimy and Jabba and you'll find it, because it's on Vimeo and it almost went viral. There's lots of hits, and I recommend it. Then you don't have to listen to me anymore. That's it. That's my go off and look on the internet for the rest of it. And thank you. I have slightly overrun because...
No, you wouldn't believe how long we could sit here sometimes. Toby is an ultimate performer. He just says, what do you want me to do? How long do you want me to do it for? And then he just gets on with it. So thank you, Toby. Have we got any questions anybody is desperate to ask?
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't just climb into Jabba and just start working it straight away.
No.
How long did that take?
I was introduced to him when he was fairly primitive looking. You climb in from underneath. There's a hole in the ground on the stage. And I'm basically sitting down. There's a little fold-out chair. I'm sitting down, so I can swing the body around. And Dave climbed in, then put a soapbox kind of in place and stood on it. There were various reasons for the height and everything. And we practiced with him as a very raw puppet for a bit. Basically, we'd stick our arms out and they'd put the glove on. And we didn't have a lot of practice because he wasn't really finished until quite shortly before shooting. They were starting to worry. Is this thing going to work? The whole, the next 6 weeks' work, this whole 15-minute sequence depends on Jabba being convincing. And they were getting like this. But eventually it grew on them. What we said to them was, you must talk to us like a character, not Toby, can you wiggle the left hand round and demystify it. You've got to, the director has to talk to us like, Jabba, would you be angry at this guy? So think Marlon Brando. So that because they talked to us like that, we were practicing all the time. We would go, okay, we understand. You want me to look this way and do that, and and we'd actually be performing while doing it, to the point where the other actors start believing you're real. And the test was the day that the director said to us, Jabba, could you look this way? And we went, we can't actually see out of these eyes. Which way are you pointing? I mean, because he'd now started talking to him as though he's really there. And then you've cracked it,
Just an observation on that particular point.
Yes.
It's interesting that the new film, I understand, has gone much more physical again.
Yes.
The puppet was so much more physically real
than
a lot of the CGI stuff.
CGI sort of works if you don't notice it's there. I mean, I love Jurassic Park, and there's quite a lot in there, but you don't notice it. The velociraptors run over the hill, you believe them. And every now and then they use a real puppet. So just as you start thinking the problem for me with CGI is when there's lots of it, and you look at it and you go, 5,000 drones marching over a desert. Well, they can't be. They didn't do that. They can't be real. I don't want to notice it's being used. And I am, of course, very disappointed at the way they did Jabba. The one in New Hope is just ugly. Doesn't even look like him. But they used a bit of footage because they wanted young Han Solo. The one in Phantom Menace looks pretty good. They've sculpted him properly. But he doesn't look dirty. He doesn't look sweaty. He doesn't look heavy. He's very clean, it's like cartoon. He can't grab people. And worst of all, and this is really why I'm annoyed, they gave him a thumb. Because actually Jabba is like this. They gave him a Disney type. They gave him, Disney characters have 3 fingers and a thumb because that's a bunch of bananas. So all the Mickey Mouses and Goofy and everybody, that's what they have. And they gave Jabba an opposable thumb so he can point. And I'm really angry about that. You'll notice it now I've said it, I'm sorry, but there you go. Yeah.
How happy was Kenny Baker that you got to wax C-3PO?
Okay, yeah. It's a funny feud between them because the characters themselves are supposed to be bickering, and the rumour's gone round that they in real life do bicker with each other, and in real life they do bicker with each other. So I'm not quite sure why. Kenny he's very old now and doesn't remember me when I see him. He goes, hey, hello, are you in Star Wars? I go, yeah, Kenny, we met last month. Anyway, he's living a long time for a small person. They don't live very long, generally speaking. So bless his soul, a bit. Anthony Daniels is a slightly fey actor, and Kenny is earthy, and Anthony is rather fey, as you can tell from the voice for C-3PO and all that. And I guess they just never really got on. Anthony's going, I'm doing a performance, I'm doing the voice, I'm doing the whole thing. They can't do it without me. You're just sitting in a tin can going, beep, beep, it's like... Then Kenny gets really angry, They set each other off. Because when we go to conventions, we meet, quite a lot. Some of the people I've only met since I've been going to conventions, to be honest. Because at the time, Bib Fortuna was always in makeup for 3 hours. By the time he came to meet me, he had red contact lenses, stuff all over him like this, and we go, okay, I'm going to have to grab you, I can't see what I'm doing. And, it was only about 5 years ago I met Mike Carter and went, oh, I'm the guy in Jabba that, So we do meet up, and that's what conventions are fun about, as well as meeting fans. But you just work in your own little world, to be honest. On a film set, it's you concentrate, basically. You've got one task to do, and you don't have much time to chat and play.
There's been many years of talk about the Dark Crystal 2.
Yeah.
If they offered you a part, would you be interested?
I'd be torn because Jim, bless his soul, died young and never wanted a follow-up. Now I'm following his request, that you don't make Dark Crystal 2. Now his children own the rights and they can do it if they want to, and they keep thinking they might. They've got a script. We will honour it. We'll do it properly, not CGI. We'll do it with puppets and so on. I'd be really torn if you said to me, "Do you want to go back and do it?" It would only be money, and I don't want to do it really. It's a bit like the Muppets now. They've done this new sleazy version of the Muppet Show, and I can't watch it. It's lost the charm, the character, the humour. Frank Oz doesn't want to be in it. Jim's dead, and although puppets live forever, Kermit's fine. They've actually done it and then disrespected the original form. So, again, if they offered you a job, I'd go, not really. But someone's doing it. I've got friends doing it. They're doing it for the money, or they think it's funny or something. But no, I just had a very lucky 7 years when people were doing things in practical effects. And just to go back to your point, they've listened to the fans, and the fans go, "Could you do it with practical effects, please? Because we are bored." And I noticed one of the characters walking behind J.J. Abrams in one of the clips I saw of him is a puppet constructed the same way as one in Labyrinth. The junk woman in Labyrinth is a puppet where the person's standing up. They're working the head here, the mouth here, and they're standing in the junk that's on the junk woman's back. Well, I saw exactly the same character walk past J.J. Abrams in the background, an upright puppeteer with a head down here and a load on its back. So they are, they're playing that game. I'm looking forward to it, but I don't like the prequels, so I'm not a Star Wars fan, as in I'll watch anything. I want it to be good. And I haven't got tickets. They got tickets. Look, they're sitting there looking smug. I haven't yet got tickets. Sorry. Yeah.
Were you aware there was going to be 12 films originally? Because as a child, we had the Green Cross Man come to our school.
Yeah.
Obviously, Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And all he got asked about was the films. Nothing about the Green Cross Code.
At the time, we were told.
At the time?
No, we were told there were going to be 9. That's because when we said, "Why is this episode 6 when there's only been 3?" And they went, "It started with episode 4. There are going to be some prequels," and we immediately went, "What? The actors will be older? How's that going to work?" Badly, as it turned out, because not just because of the CGI, but because you haven't got any of the actors and the plotting is different and all that stuff. And now they're going to the sequels 30 years later. They can use Han Solo 30 years older. I don't exactly know how they're going to use him, but this one makes sense in that they've got a much better opportunity now of getting it right, I think. But yeah, we were told there were 9. That's what I was told when I worked on mine.
Darth Vader's told us 12. And that was in about 1979, I suppose.
Well, where would they be? Later ones or earlier ones?
No, he was a Green Cross Man in a silly green suit.
I don't know. We were told 9. Not that it was any of our business. I mean, that was... Sorry.
Digressing slightly,
Yeah.
you worked early in your career with John Martin.
Yes.
I wonder if there are any signs then of what was to come later with him, how he was.
He was my best friend. Well, it wasn't my best friend. Some of the people... Because I'm not a musician, it's very hard. Musicians talk for a bit and then get stoned and whatever, go for a drink and play darts or something like that. But eventually, if you can't play music, you can't be close to them. Because eventually they go, "I'm fed up with talking, come on, get..." And I was just too cowardly to get on the bongos, you know what I mean? And I'd go and make tea and things. He was a lovely fella to me. He was absolutely wonderful. I used to babysit for him so that, and all that. So we were quite close. When you say, was there any clue about how he turned out? Well, it depends. He was very sweet and kind and angelic, and he was also a thug. Kind of Glaswegian attitude to things. So there was this, listen to the love songs he's done. They're absolutely fabulous. And you wouldn't know he would go hooligan around with his bass player and getting seriously drunk and legless and fighting people and all that. He was definitely a two-temperament person. And there was some footage just before he died of him over in Ireland. And my partner, who knows I knew him, watched that documentary and went, he looks like an idiot. I won't use the word she used, but and that's the thuggy bit of him. And I went, well, sorry, but he was a sweetheart to me. I'll give you a very quick example. When I went to the States to hitchhike around, he had been over there doing festivals and things, and he called one of his mates in the States and said, my friend is coming over with his girlfriend, can you put him up for the first week while he gets over jet lag? And we went there, we drove up to Woodstock, which is not where the festival was, but this is where the friend lived. And this guy took care of us for a week and just orientated us to the States. And John had rang ahead and said, look after him. So that's how I remember him, and then I'd be in California and hear on the radio, may you never sleep out in the cold and stuff. And it sounded like a personal message. It was like hearing him down the phone, not some weird record thing. So yeah, it's one of those things. Anyway, he's gone now and he's left the music, so no one's got a clue how unpleasant he could be. Yeah. Any more?
You've worked with some pretty visionary directors. Who was your favourite?
Ooh, that's tricky. Yeah, that is tricky. Because you mean the end result of the film? Films are always a bit disappointing because in your head, when you're making it, you have this perfect vision. Not only the directors, but the performers have an ideal that they think it's going to be. And, so it's not quite the ideal when it comes out. I really like Dark Crystal, and therefore that's Frank helping Jim direct. I just love Frank Oz and Jim Henson. Richard Marquand was directing for George Lucas on Jedi. Neil Jordan on Company of Wolves. I mean, they're all wonderful, people to work with. Frank was fun on Little Shop of Horrors because he knew how boring filming is and how difficult and uncomfortable puppetry is. So he did things like bring in a table tennis table so that when we had an hour while they're resetting and so on, we'd have table tennis tournaments and things just to keep the energy going. Because you can feel that with the original Muppet shows. People were fighting to be on that because the energy they kept in the studio was fun. You're supposed to be having fun doing this. And that comes through the screen. And Frank was very good at table tennis, which was the other reason he brought the table, because he'd beat everybody. And I loved being in doubles on his side because I was going to win. And sometimes you let the director win, do you know what I mean? You don't want to beat the director, then you're in trouble. So yeah, the fun part of it is why I like the Muppet stuff. They created that energy, and you were supposed to go to work looking forward to going to work, desperate to do your best. And Jim, because I stayed with Jim quite a lot of the time and had to be quiet, mostly leave him alone. If I've got time for this, one more story. Just as we're lying on a trolley because we're going to do a walking shot, and there's no hole in the ground, so we're both lying next to each other like this. And I'm aware of him, yeah. And a guy came up in a suit and said, Jim, sorry to interrupt you, but we've got some problem in the office in LA and we need a decision made and so on. And Jim said, have you got your toothbrush and passport? And the guy said, yeah. And he said, could you just go and sort it out? And then he just switched back to what he was doing. And what? And I had to say something. I said, how do you make a decision that quickly? And he went, it's costing me £100 a minute sitting here to make a decision, to be indecisive. It's going to cost me money. I make a decision and I trust all the people I've hired to let me know if I've made a bad decision. It will come back to me later. But, delegate tasks, hire the best talent you can get, and make sure it's fun. And I just went, he runs a whole empire. And he's delegating those tasks, he's trusting people to get it right and to tell him he's wrong when he's wrong. And most bosses can't do that. And Jim was just like that. I even asked him how he kept serene, with the problems of filming and so it's money and all that stuff going on. He went, well, if I don't, when I come in the gate, the guy on the walkie-talkie says, Jim's here, he looks in a terrible mood, and everyone's, whoa! And he walks on the set, everyone's going to be, and he went, it's got to be fun. That's how you get the best work out of people. Trust them, look forward to it. It's going to be a boring day. Your 10 hours is going to have a lot of dragging periods, but basically you want that energy. So the end result might not be. Dark Crystal is not my favourite film. To me, it's a 2 or 3 star film. It was a failure at the time, and it's a cult movie now. It sags in the middle. I would criticise it. In terms of success, I think Roger Rabbit is my favourite because it's a really great dynamic movie. It's a one-off. No one's ever done anything like it before or since. Robert Zemeckis. So in terms of the best movie to have been part of, I suppose I'd pick Roger Rabbit. But the most fun to be with was Jim Henson. If that makes sense.
I saw an interview with Bob Hoskins.
Yes.
Who said that Roger Rabbit was one of the most difficult films that
Yes.
he'd participated in.
Absolutely.
Because there was no interaction
Yeah.
and it was so difficult.
We all had to support him in that. I skipped a bit because I've always got a half-hour version of all these stories. But mostly what we're doing is, like I say, special effects. When Jessica strokes Bob's tie in the club, it's just me and Dave Berkeley with an invisible thread. You know that. But we did have a bendy toy version of Roger that could just, one of those, you remember bendy toys with wire in the middle and foam? And we would, to help Bob get the eye line right and the focus, we would actually bounce this round. So Roger's going to go over here and he's going to sit there, then he's going to look round, then he's going to do... So the nearest I got to puppeteering was bouncing this thing around with Bob. Then he's going to go out this door and then someone else up there has to open the door. And so we would figure it all out with a real Roger there. And the guy doing the voice was standing next to the camera. So he's doing a live voice for Roger. And he used to wear a rabbit costume because otherwise people wouldn't know what he's doing there. So to get into character, you've got a life-size Roger there doing the voice. You've got Bob staring into empty space. You've got us doing all sorts of weird little bits with strings. And all of it got painted in afterwards. I mean, not CGI, that's hand-painted, like classic Disney, frame by frame. That's why it's never been done since. That's frame by frame painting. And it is a classic. I mean, I actually am proud of that one. But it was a very wobbly little job for us because we never knew what we were going to have to do when we came in. The special effects department would devise expensive ways of doing it, but we were the improvising six. Give you an example, they made a little mechanical arm that was... Yeah, it was just, it was servos and it buzzed and it was... The cartoonist was always there to go, that'll work, that's fine. If I went to reach for that, he goes, I can just stretch the arm, don't worry if it's, He was there for feedback, and somehow this servo arm for a weasel with a gun poking Bob it was just wrong. They came to us, and my mate Mike Quinn said, we were in the dressing room, we were off the set, and he grabbed a coat hanger, a wire coat hanger, and he ran down to the set and goes, where's the gun? Wrapped the wire around it, lay on the floor, went, what, I have to poke Bob in the chest? And, it was done. And there's the special effects department with their special arm going, bit of wire. It's the puppetry skill, though, you see, and it was a complementary team. They did some good stuff, we did some good stuff. But we never knew what we were going to have to do. And like I say, with the rope and everything else, we were making it up on the spot with people with a taxi meter going like that on money. And no one said, tomorrow you'll have to do this, because ours were always on the set improvisations. So yeah, Bob was, and he was a lovely guy. He didn't go off and be a star in a caravan, because he depended entirely on us. So we had to be real mates. He was going a little crazy with imagining creatures. He said he'd got it off his kid. He had a kid of 4 or 5 or something with imaginary friends, and he went, studying the kids about how they can just imagine stuff. But by the end of the day, he was definitely. But it is a wonderful film. It's just Richard Williams who drew it all. Basically, that classic Disney style is so different from CGI. The detail in it is just amazing. There you go. Any more? Enough?
Never enough, Toby, never enough.
Whatever.
But I do appreciate that you don't sort of go down the own gossipy route and talk about this star and that star when you're talking about the performance and the art, and it's just really interesting to hear all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out, as all of our speakers do come out and give their time for free, and we're very fortunate to have Toby. He doesn't do this sort of thing, he's put a lot of work into it. He's the most generous chap I know, so if you could give him a big round of applause.